That is a huge question.
It is a huge question.
Number one, I really never came into his life until he was, well, in his 30s, 33. So there's an awful lot that I had of his life that I had no personal experience with.
Right.
So we've got to assume I bumped into a mature adult. Pretty well formed, although his art was not. His, what we think of as Richard George, happened rather simultaneously with his coming to Miami, meeting me. I was teaching at Miami University. I believe I had been there 7 years. I think at that time I had just gotten promoted to an associate professor. And I remember I was in England that summer, had come back, and walked into school as it was starting, just a day or so early before the classes started. And I went into the print room, and there was an individual I had never seen before, and I came to understand was one of the new graduate students. And I don't know what I said, but it was something that he must have thought was appropriately stupid or something, but he gave me some wisecrack back. And I sort of thought, well, okay, you know, and never thought much about it. But over the course of the year, the art department is not large. You do meet the graduate students and get to know them. And Dick was around a lot. He had, they gave him a private studio. Ed Fullwider was the chair at the time. And Ed was smart enough to know that Dick didn't really need to be taught much. He just needed to find. And he gave him a studio in the old food service building. It was upstairs. And he basically left him alone. And I should back up a bit. The reason Dick came to Miami was because of Ed Fullwider. And you're talking 1969, and you have a young man who wants to be a figurative artist. And he's in New York City. And he thinks about going to Hunter. He thinks about the other possibilities. And every school takes a look at what he thinks he wants to do, which is figurative work. And at that point, it was highly illustrational because of his work with Riley, Frank Riley in New York, who taught illustration. And that backs it up even further, but we won't go there for now. So Hunter and other schools told Dick, your kind of painting isn't anymore. It's non-objective. It should be basically abstract, if we want to use that there. That's too many definitions in that word. But literally that Dick was interested in figurative painting. He was interested in Victorian work, and all of that wasn't where it was. So Hip New York told Dick, in essence, you better look elsewhere. And someone told him about Ed Fullwider, who himself had been an illustrator, did a lot of work for Ford Motor Company, and that Ed was chair out at Miami, and that maybe he should think about sending Ed a few slides. And it was Ed that took a look at him and said, yeah, that's okay, come on out. And it was Ed who, in essence, knew that he had all of the technical training he needed. He didn't need to learn how to do the figure. He did not need to learn how to put paint on canvas. He had to learn how to get into his head just what he wanted his particular art to be about and how it should look. And so during the course of the year, a group of us would start going for coffee. I was not that much older than a lot of the students in many ways. I think when I returned to Miami, I was to teach. I was 24 years old, you know, and so it was not unnatural to kind of, you want to go get a cup of coffee? Sure. Went over to what they call the Redskin Reservation, the Reds, get coffee. And it just developed from there. It wasn't anything spectacular. There was no overnight romance, but rather sort of getting to know him, getting to like him. At the beginning, I think I had absolutely no thought that anything further than a friendship with a graduate student was what this was going to be. One day in the spring of the year that I met him, Ed asked me if I'd like to go to the graduate Dick's studio. He said, I'm going down and look at some of the work. I don't know, he'd been there for several weeks. He didn't know what Dick was doing, basically, except painting, and he was passionate about that. That was the one thing that drove his life, was to make art. So he took me with him, and I went up into the studio, and here was what I would call sort of a, maybe kind of a biomorphic, gosh, what would be the word for it? Sort of a biomorphic science fiction world evolving. When Dick was in New York and was illustrating textbooks, they were doing a lot of biology textbooks. And what he had behind him was a lot of these biological drawings. So they were carefully executed, rather like the figurative work you see here. But they were these, kind of round shapes with sort of undulating surfaces, non-objective in the sense that you weren't really sure what the object was, but they were also something that you thought that there's something there. This is not merely an illustration of this object. I think it was then that in retrospect, I realized he was always a surrealist. That was always there. So I looked the work over, and I remember thinking, well, it's really interesting. I don't know what's going to come of this. And I don't think this is great stuff right now. And I never actually thought in terms of Dick until a bit later that Dick had a serious possibility of being an artist that would be above average, let's put it that way, who would do something that was unique and would be different. But I knew that that was not that work. It was not formed. And that indeed was the struggle he himself was having at that point. What do? I have all of these skills. How do I want to develop this? He was also sure, and this is interesting, that he did not want to be an illustrator as we think of that. He wanted to move into that world of painting, thinking in Rembrandtian terms. And by the way, he was always very painterly. That was always there. I have a favorite illustrator, N.C. Wyeth, Andrew Wyeth's father. He's marvelous. He is a painter's painter. And I thought of Dick in those terms, that here is a trained illustrator who, from the very beginning, and I have some paintings at home, little ones totally unrecognizable that he did while he was in undergraduate school. They are abstract expressionists, as you would expect for that day and that age. Painterly, always. So that was always with him. At that point, I didn't think too much about it, but it was also later that spring that Dick asked if I would marry him. I'd gone to New York. He had been there, went back to New York for spring break, and I had gone too. I pop into New York every so often, and Dick knew it very well. And so I stayed at the Hilton near the Museum of Modern Art, around 52nd Street. And Dick would come pick me up, and we'd go do something for the day, whatever it was. And one day we went up to the Whitney Museum and met Peter Lord, who had been his partner in New York in his illustration studio there. And Peter, as usual, was Peter to the nth degree. The world is collapsing. Oh, civilization is coming to an end. And here was this guy, Peter, who Dick was introducing me to, and I was getting this marvelous drama about, oh, the end is near. No one has any taste anymore. Everything civilized is collapsing, and I thought, oh, this is really pretty great. This is this is an interesting experience. And we had a good week going around, seeing things in New York and museums. And at that point, I left and came home. There was no indication. Dick never really gave any indication until he asked me to marry him that he was really pretty serious about anything. And it kind of came out of the blue. And I thought about it. I was at that point 31, almost 32. We were 32 when I got married. And I thought, yeah, he's interesting enough.